is JohnArrow. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mutual Mobile. I'm joined today by Sam Gaddis, who's also a co-founder. We're a 300-person company bootstrapped out of Austin, Texas. And so what we do is we work with the Fortune 1000 to solve really high-stakes problems in mobility. We do a lot in the healthcare space, trying to figure out how we can work better with doctors to aggregate patient information. We do a lot in education, trying to figure out how to replace textbooks with iPads. I'm really glad that Ben was able to share the Austin perspective and John was able to share the Silicon Valley perspective. Just out of curiosity, if your business is based in a city other than the Bay Area, can you raise your hand? That's fabulous. I think that's just incredible. We hear on TechCrunch and we see in the news every day, right, that Silicon Valley is the epicenter of the entrepreneur world. And in many ways it is. But there's a lot happening in the rest of the country and a lot happening in the rest of the world. I grew up in Austin, Texas, so I really saw that firsthand, and it was a natural starting point to build a company. And so we've assembled 300 people in the last 3.5 years, and it's been difficult. We very quickly exhausted the talent that was nearby at the University of Texas and the talent that had come during the dot-com boom. In fact, last quarter, I looked at the statistic, and 4 out of 5 people that we hired, we had to relocate from out of state. And that's expensive. It's uprooting people, but we need those types of people, so we were okay with doing it. It's not an ideal scenario, though, is it? Right? If you're taking brilliant people from one area, it means you're depriving people from some other city of those same people. And so ideally what happens is that you can hire locally. You can have an entrepreneurial base that creates those jobs. Because that's the only way that you can have a net positive increase in jobs. It's when people like yourselves go out and start those companies. I recently joined the Austin Technology Council board, and really that's one of the reasons that I did it. My soapbox is how can we make Austin, how can we make other cities outside of the Valley entrepreneurial? And I really think it starts in higher ed. Higher ed's great, in some professions you definitely need it, but it does a very poor job, in my opinion, for inspiring people to create businesses. If you walk through the grounds of the University of Texas at Austin, great university, talk to some of the students in the computer science program there. I just saw some horns. Yep. And you talk to those students and you ask them, what are you going to do after college? And you'll hear some really ambitious plans. Some of them will say, I'm going to go work at Google or Facebook. I talked to a girl who'd been her lifelong ambition to work at Apple, and she's going to be doing just that. And those are great plans. But if you go to Palo Alto and you walk around Stanford, which I do because a lot of our people we're having to bring in from Stanford, and you ask them what they want to do, same discipline, computer science, they will tell you, well, I'm going to go start a company. Those are two very, very different sets of ideology. And what's the difference? You have two very prestigious schools, and really, aside from Stanford, you're going to get the same response that you get at the University of Texas. What's the reason behind that? I think a lot of it comes down to mentorship. There's not a whole lot of entrepreneurs outside of the Valley. We're very much a rarity. And so when students who are interested in starting their own business want to figure out how to do it, they look to higher ed. And unfortunately, the answers aren't there, or the answers they get by going to B school, they take them in the wrong direction, unfortunately. Is there anybody here, how many people here have heard of cargo cults? A couple people? Okay, I'm going to go off on a real brief tangent, but I promise it will become relevant again. During World War II, we were fighting a war in 2 theaters, right? The Pacific Theater was really where a lot of our effort was concentrated in. And rather than storming mainland Japan, we did this island hopping campaign where we'd go to places like Guam and Wake and dozens of other smaller places that we've never even heard of. So when the US troops landed on these islands with their big boats and they mowed down the trees to create airfields, they were greeted by these indigenous people who had never before seen this type of technology. They thought of us as really gods, and they would do everything that they could to help us because they wanted us to give them food and radios and ammo, aka cargo. Well, they fell in love with us, but we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Pacific Theater War was over, so we packed up and left. Didn't know how to say goodbye. We didn't speak their language. Now, the interesting thing about this is it wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that people who wanted to document the war started going back to these small islands. What they found was incredible. Every day at dawn, these islanders would wake up and they would go out to where the airstrips were. They would check for debris and remove rocks. They would take coconuts and put them on their ears and go like this with their arms, because those are the events they saw right before the airplanes landed.
They built air traffic towers.
They built bamboo air traffic control towers because the ones we had built had long since been eroded away. They thought that was the key to getting planes to return. And when we know today that's the classic error in causality. And unfortunately, so much of higher ed today is suffering from the exact same problem. We think that the way we build entrepreneurs is we encourage them to do MBA programs, which are great. They'll teach you fundamentals, but they won't teach you how to build a successful business. The only way that we can teach others to build a successful business is by having them talk to the practitioners. And the practitioners are all of you here in this room. And so I really implore you to make a commitment. I'm making the same commitment myself, is to find those people who do want to start their own business and they're looking in the wrong direction. They're that villager out in the bamboo control tower, and talk with them and explain what really goes into building a company.